Okay, so reading your comments, as I always do right before we begin, and let me tell you, every single one of our viewers are reflecting back on, well, it's been a year. Today's the anniversary of the January 6th attack on the Capitol, and supporters of former President Trump stormed the nation's Capitol 1 year ago today. There's some of the footage we all remember being on our cell phones. In fact, us hosts were all texting one another. Now, some violently, as you see in these pictures, clashed with police. The FBI estimates around 2,500 people took part. More than 725 people have been charged, and the FBI is still looking for more than 350 others, including over 250 who assaulted police officers. Now, President Biden did speak about this morning from the Capitol Statutory Hall. Take a look.
You can't love your country only when you win. You can't obey the law only when it's convenient. You can't be patriotic when you embrace and enable lies. Those who stormed this Capitol, and those who instigated and incited, and those who called on them to do so, held a dagger at the throat of America and American democracy.
Now, several Republicans have also spoken out on this anniversary. Texas Senator Ted Cruz called the riot a, quote, violent terrorist attack. And Representative Liz Cheney, who is the co-chair of the January 6th committee, had this to say on the Today Show.
All of my colleagues, anyone who attempts to minimize what happens, anyone who denies the truth of what happened, they ought to be ashamed of themselves. And history is watching, and history will judge them. But the American people have the ability to ensure that we protect our Constitution and we protect our institutions with their votes, with their voices, and we certainly are not going to be part on our committee of allowing those institutions to be unraveled.
All right, so I'm continuing to read your comments. Clearly, January 6th struck a chord with all of you. Jeff, when you look back on a year ago today, what does January 6th represent to you?
I mean, at the very least, it was embarrassing, right? It was embarrassing for our country, our nation. That's at the very bottom. I think we could all agree on, we're never going to be 100% on any issue about anything, whether you like apples or the government. But I think the majority of us could agree that this was wrong. This was bad. This was a terrible time for our nation. What we're going through socially is terrible, and it's reflective of that. Joe Biden did say something that I want to read, though, in a quick press conference on his way out. He said, "Great nations don't bury the truth. They face up to it." Man, I wish that was true about everything that we had going on in our great nation, but unfortunately it's not. He's right, but he has some owning up to do about certain things as well. I'm not going down Joe Biden's path, but like I said, at the very least, it's embarrassing.
Lindsay, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm happy that Liz Cheney and Ted Cruz and other leaders spoke up about this, especially because what she said was minimizing, and that's what we can't do, is minimize what happened or airbrush over it like it was only a select few. There were a group of people out there that were encouraged based on a lie about voter fraud, and so it's just frustrating to me because I remember that we thought the worst news of the year was coronavirus, and then come to find out that some of the worst news was also that people are storming our Capitol trying to stop leaders from doing something that's one of the most patriotic things, is like finalizing the election results that were actually fair election. And so, especially because it was tied in with the fact that people were voting from home and mail-in ballots because we were trying to protect one another. So to see people rioting about a lie was really frustrating to me, and I was let down that that's the place we're in. It felt like Jeff was saying, we'll never be on any kind of common ground if we can't even get that together.
And speaking of that, Lindsay, and I'm glad you brought that up. In fact, a lot of our viewers are saying the very same thing. What worries me is, Lindsay called it a lie, and we've had all the data and all the experts out there look into the voter fraud, and they've all agreed that President Biden won, and there was no voter fraud. My concern is if 71%, I have the stats here, if 71% of Republicans and 33% of Americans overall still believe that the election was stolen. We were all here on January 6th last year. We all saw the video, the pictures. We were able to talk to people. We've been watching the committee. We've been able to follow the voter fraud and learn that there wasn't any voter fraud. Are you concerned that 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the road that will somehow be lost or diminished? Or do you think that history and the truth will finally prove itself?
Well, you said a lot there, Sam, so let's unpack it. First of all, whose truth? Because when you start talking about truth, I think this kind of scared me because it almost represented the final fissure in Americans, our mindset, because now we have videotape and we still see different things. It's like if we watch a videotape of people robbing a bank and I saw a bank robbery and you saw people taking back their money that bank had taken from them. We're looking at the same thing, but something very different. And I really wonder how we can proceed from this if we can look at something like the attack on the Capitol and a year later we still have people that are like, I completely agree. It didn't really sway a lot of people that, people still think it was Antifa. I don't know where we go from that. If you can't agree, if we watch the Super Bowl and the Cowboys beat the Browns 10-3 and I say, no, the Browns won, and you go, no, look at the score, and I go, that score is not right. Well, then there's nowhere to go. And that's what I'm worried about, Jeff. I'm worried that there's nowhere to go.
I think everybody who tries to think a little bit logically, Al, and I believe that we try to on our show, I don't know where we go from here. I really don't. I try to be a positive guy. My cup is always half full. But as far as our society goes, we are just never, ever, ever going to agree on anything moving forward. No matter what, everyone's going to have what they think their truth is, and they're going to stand their ground, and they're going to be right. We need to learn from our mistakes. We need to grow. People don't want to say that they're wrong anymore. People never want to admit their faults, and that's the biggest fault, I think, of us as a people.
Well, where do we go from here then, Lindsay? And I fully agree with you, Jeff, but where do we go from here? Because I think of our future generations, right? I think of Al's kids. I think of Lawson and Leighton, Sophie and Miles. Now I think of Kinsley. How do you think they're going to look back on January 6th, Lindsay?
Well, I think, first of all, like, elected officials have to put people over the party. It can't just be like we're staying on party lines just instead of people's lives that actually were lost. Several people were hurt and or killed on January 6th last year. But I also think, we have to make sure that in our history books, we're not sweeping this under the rug and we're actually getting it right and saying that, this was a riot at our Capitol where people were actually hurt while they were trying to do something that was one of the most American things that we can possibly do in this country. And while there might be American flags waved with some of these protesters and rioters, it's really the problem that what they were doing was un-American in itself, and they were being enabled and kind of encouraged by some of our leaders. And nobody wants to take fault for that because they didn't say to actually kill somebody or the words to actually hurt somebody, but they did tell them to believe a lie that would cause so much rage within people that they would go out and do something about it. And so I think we have to get that part right first and admit to that and just try to make our country whole again so that we can have conversations about how to move forward, because until we accept the truth, we can't move forward.
Yeah, the first step is accepting the truth, and I really hope this is what
Once again, though, whose truth?
But I hope this brings Republicans and Democrats together.
I hope so, but Sam,
it already is to some degree. Look at the committee.
If the British had beaten the American Revolution, if they had tamped it down, how would their history books remember that? They would look at that as an attempted insurrection. But because we won, air quotes, that we look at it as they look like patriots. And I believe the people that were storming the walls and showing their faces thought that they would be remembered as patriots 100 years from now. And you're making that face, but they live in a totally different world than you. That's a really scary thing.
It is, because there's 5 families that still to this day are mourning their loved ones.
Absolutely.
I just want to leave it on the note of Eugene Goodman, the police officer, total hero. I hope the history books make sure that there's a big picture of him.
There needs to be a statue.
There he is right there, because he saved so many lives by having the bravery to stand up to a lot of those rioters and terrorists, I will call them, and redirecting them away from where the Congress people were. Before we go to break, speaking of those 5 families, we want to take a moment to remember and honor the lives lost on January 6th, 2021, including Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick. In total, 5 people lost their lives that day. Several more committed suicide in the days and months after.